everyone. Ready for a deep dive into some serious knowledge about how we sabotage ourselves at work.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be good.
I gotta say, prepping for this deep dive into get out of your own way at work was a real eye-opener for me.
I bet.
And I'm guessing you're here because, like me, you want to kind of figure out how to just crush it at work, but without all the stress.
For sure, who doesn't?
Right.
Absolutely.
And what's so fascinating about this book is it connects our workplace struggles to something we rarely think about: our childhood experiences.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, it makes you think about how much of our adult behavior is shaped by those early years.
Absolutely.
Okay, so get this. The book actually compares the workplace to a schoolyard A&D, a family dynamic.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like our brains are wired to see those power dynamics playing out again.
It's true. You start seeing your boss like a critical parent or a colleague like that annoying sibling.
Oh, totally. And then suddenly we're reacting in ways that, well, they don't exactly make sense in a professional setting.
Exactly. You're bringing all that baggage from childhood into the workplace.
So you're saying, like, my tendency to, I don't know, over-explain everything to my boss could be because my dad never really took me seriously as a kid.
It's possible. The book talks about how those early experiences, like being constantly criticized or even overly coddled, can really shape our coping mechanisms.
It's like we're carrying all that baggage into our adult lives without even realizing it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so how does all this baggage actually play out at work? The book talks about these fight or flight responses, but I'm not sure how that applies to, like, an office meeting.
Think of it this way. Fight might show up as being overly defensive or arguing every point.
Oh, okay.
Maybe even getting a little aggressive sometimes.
Yeah, definitely seen that.
Right. Flight could be like avoiding tough conversations or procrastinating on important tasks.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe even trying to please everyone all the time just to avoid conflict.
Oh, wow, that's me. I'm definitely more of a flight person.
It explains a lot, right?
Seriously, this is like a major light bulb moment for me.
Yeah, the book goes deep into some specific behaviors, and I think you'll find them super relatable.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with one that I think we all struggle with at some point: procrastination.
Oh, procrastination. We've all been there.
It's my nemesis. I'm always putting things off until the last minute.
The book goes beyond that typical just do it advice. It actually tells this story about George.
Okay.
He was an editor, brilliant guy, but he procrastinated constantly.
Driving everyone crazy, I bet.
Oh, yeah. His team was pulling their hair out.
So it wasn't just laziness.
The book suggests it's often a mask for deeper stuff. Could be fear of failure, maybe perfectionism.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Or even like a subconscious desire to rebel,
Like against authority.
Exactly. For George, it was all tied back to his childhood and his demanding dad.
If you grow up feeling like nothing you do is good enough, it makes sense that you might avoid taking on new tasks.
You're afraid to put yourself out there.
Exactly. But I'm guessing procrastination has more consequences than just, like, missing deadlines.
Oh, yeah. The book points out it can lead to chronic stress, being less productive. It can even mess up your professional reputation.
Yikes, that's definitely motivation to get my act together.
Right.
Okay, what's another behavior that the book digs into?
Let's talk about defensiveness. That feeling you get when you feel like you're constantly being attacked at work, even when the criticism is supposed to be helpful.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. Like, I always get super defensive during performance reviews, even if the feedback is totally valid.
The book has this cool framework for dealing with this.
Oh, I like frameworks.
It suggests categorizing people as either A or B.
A or B. Okay, I'm listening.
So, A people are those folks who are just perpetually critical. You know the type. They find fault in everything.
Gotcha.
B people, on the other hand, are generally supportive.
Okay.
And they offer feedback with good intentions.
So it's like figure out who's an A and who's a B, and then what?
It's not about permanently labeling people. It's more about recognizing patterns and adjusting your reactions. If someone is consistently negative and critical, it's helpful to reframe their feedback and not take it personally.
That's actually a really helpful way to look at it. I've definitely wasted energy getting upset by feedback from people who are just generally negative, regardless of who they're talking to.
Right, it's like their default setting. And the book points out that our childhood experiences can play a big role in how we interpret feedback, too.
Oh, totally. Like, if you had a critical parent, you might be super sensitive to any kind of criticism, even if it's meant to be helpful.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, it's like all those old patterns are still playing out. Okay, this is already making me think a lot about how much of our adult behavior is influenced by our childhood.
It really is fascinating.
Now let's talk about a behavior that I think might be a little harder to confront.
Okay, what's that?
Staying too long in a bad job.
Ah, yeah, the golden handcuffs.
I'm totally guilty of this one. I stayed at my last job for way too long, even though I was miserable.
It's a common trap.
Hmm.
The book uses this example of someone feeling trapped by a paycheck, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I get it.
They're unhappy, but they can't seem to leave.
It's like staying in a bad relationship. Sometimes the fear of the unknown is just more powerful than the desire to escape.
It's true. And the book talks about some of the reasons we do this, like fear of quitting or maybe this optimism that things will magically change.
Yeah, hoping things will get better on their own.
Or even that fear of admitting we were wrong to take the job in the first place.
Oh yeah, pride can definitely get in the way.
Totally.
So how do we break free from this cycle? How do we know when it's actually time to move on?
That's a great question. And it's something we can definitely explore further as we dive deeper into the book.
Okay, I'm ready for more. This is already giving me a lot to think about.
It's good stuff.
What's another behavior we can unpack?
Let's talk about talking too much.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we've all been there. You know, sometimes you get so excited about a project or an idea
Oh, yeah.
that you just kind of take over the conversation.
Absolutely. It's easy to get carried away.
I remember this one time I was so excited about this new marketing campaign. I basically monopolized the entire team meeting. Like, I don't think anyone else got a word in edgewise.
Oh, no.
And later, a colleague pulled me aside and was like, you might want to let other people share their thoughts too. It was so embarrassing.
The book actually tells a similar story about this guy named David.
Okay.
He overheard his colleagues making fun of him for, like, how much he talked in meetings.
Ouch.
It's a good reminder that, what we think is engaging or informative
Yeah.
could be coming across as totally self-absorbed.
Right. Or even disrespectful. Like, you're not giving anyone else a chance to contribute.
Exactly. It's
Ah.
not just about being annoying or long-winded.
Yeah.
It can actually damage your relationships and your reputation at work.
So what are some of the reasons why people might talk too much in a professional setting? Like, is it just a personality thing or there's something deeper going on?
The book digs into that.
Yeah.
It suggests that it can stem from insecurity, maybe a need for validation, or even like a fear of silence.
Oh, that's interesting. It's like we're trying to fill the space with our own voice to avoid feeling uncomfortable.
Exactly. And the book actually breaks down these different communication styles.
Okay, tell me more.
It talks about monologues,
Uh-huh.
diatribes,
Okay.
arguments, discussions, and ideally dialogues.
So it's like a spectrum of communication styles.
Yeah, and the book encourages us to strive for those last two discussions and dialogues, where there's a genuine exchange of ideas,
Where you're actually listening to each other.
Yes,
Okay, so it's not about never speaking up. It's about being mindful of how much space we're taking up in a conversation.
exactly. And making sure we're really engaging with others,
Yeah.
not just broadcasting our own thoughts all the time. Now, here's one that might seem kind of counterintuitive.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Being competent but out of touch.
That's an interesting one. How can someone be really good at their job but still be out of touch?
The book tells this story about Leonard, a sales executive.
Okay.
He was brilliant, like top performer, closed deals left and right.
Impressive.
But he was terrible at connecting with people.
Ah.
Just lacked basic social skills. Came across as arrogant and dismissive.
So he was technically skilled, but lacked that emotional intelligence.
Exactly. And this can be a huge blind spot for people who are super competent,
They think their technical skills are enough to get by.
Right. They might even see interpersonal skills as unimportant or even a weakness.
But in reality, building strong relationships is essential for success in any field.
Totally. It's about the whole package.
Makes sense.
And speaking of things that are essential, let's talk about a behavior that can be really detrimental, especially at work. Lacking self-discipline.
Ouch. Yeah. This is one I definitely struggle with, especially when it comes to time management and organization.
Don't worry, you're not alone. The book tells the story about Phil, a super talented designer
Okay.
who was constantly missing deadlines
Oh, no.
and creating chaos for everyone because he couldn't get organized.
It's not just about personal productivity then.
Right. It's about the impact on everyone else. And the book suggests that this lack of self-discipline can often stem from how we were raised.
Oh, interesting. Like, if you didn't have a lot of structure growing up.
Exactly. In Phil's case, his childhood was really chaotic, no routine. So as an adult, he really struggled with self-discipline.
That makes a lot of sense. If you never learn those skills early on, it can be tough to develop them later in life. But I'm assuming it's not impossible.
Oh, definitely not. The book really emphasizes that self-discipline is like a muscle, you know, the more you work it, the stronger it gets.
So it's about setting small goals, establishing routines, and holding ourselves accountable.
You got it. It's about building those habits over time.
Okay, that's encouraging. It's like there's hope for us disorganized folks.
Absolutely. There's always hope.
What's another behavior we can explore?
Let's talk about something that can be a huge drain on productivity.
Yeah.
Wasting time.
Ooh, I think we've all been guilty of that at some point.
For sure. Whether it's scrolling through social media, going to unnecessary meetings.
Or just getting caught up in busy work that doesn't really matter.
The book actually mentions this Harvard Business Review study that found a whopping 90% of managers admitted to wasting time at work.
90%. Wow, so it's not just me. But I'm curious, like, what are some of the less obvious ways that we waste time at work? Besides the obvious ones.
The book talks about this thing called reactive mode.
Okay, reactive mode.
It's when you're constantly responding to emails and messages and requests,
Yeah.
without taking the time to prioritize or strategize.
Oh, I do that all the time. It's like I'm so busy putting out fires that I don't have time to actually, think about what's important.
Exactly. And the book actually suggests a counterintuitive solution, taking time to think proactively.
That does seem a little counterintuitive. Like, if you're already feeling overwhelmed, wouldn't taking time to plan just make things worse?
It might seem that way, but in reality, it can actually save you time and energy in the long run.
That's a good point. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
You got it. Now let's dive into a belief that can be surprisingly self-sabotaging. Thinking you're indispensable.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm guessing it's not just about arrogance or ego, though.
No, it's actually more complex than that. The book tells this story about Anthony, this high-maintenance executive who thought he was irreplaceable.
I bet that didn't end well.
He got fired.
Ouch.
It's a cautionary tale about overestimating our importance.
And underestimating the contributions of others.
Right. The book suggests that this belief often comes from a place of insecurity.
Really? That's interesting.
Like you're trying to compensate for a lack of self-worth by inflating your importance.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like sometimes the people who seem the most confident are actually the most insecure.
You nailed it.
Right?
Now let's switch gears and talk about a behavior that's all about trying to be liked. People-pleasing.
Ugh, I've been there. I used to bend over backwards trying to make everyone happy, but it always backfired.
The book uses the example of Raymond, a manager who was so afraid of upsetting anyone that he couldn't effectively lead his team.
It's like you're so focused on avoiding conflict that you end up sacrificing your own needs and the needs of the team.
Exactly. And the book points out that this often comes from a fear of rejection, or this belief that our worth depends on the approval of others.
It's like you're constantly seeking validation from outside sources instead of developing a strong sense of self-worth.
You got it. And the book encourages us to shift our focus,
From seeking approval to setting boundaries?
Yes, and developing what they call a master mindset, prioritizing our own needs and values while still being respectful of others.
Okay, this is giving me a lot to think about. What's another behavior we can unpack?
Let's talk about feeling guilty. That feeling that can just weigh you down.
Oh, for sure. Guilt can be a real drag, especially at work. It can make it so hard to, make decisions or move forward.
Totally. The book actually tells this story about Al Dorskind.
Okay.
He was an executive, and he fired everyone at Universal Studios.
Wow, everyone.
Yeah, the whole shebang. And he said he didn't feel a shred of guilt about it.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is. And regardless of how you feel about what he did, the book uses this story to highlight the difference between feeling guilty and actually being guilty.
Oh, that's interesting. So, is our guilt actually justified, or are we just making ourselves feel bad for no reason?
Exactly. It's about examining the source of that guilt. Did you actually do something wrong?
Right.
Or are you just worried about how other people will react?
Oh, that's so true. I used to feel guilty about saying no to requests, even when I was already swamped.
And was it because you were actually doing something wrong?
No, it was more about, not wanting to disappoint people.
Exactly. And the book suggests that dwelling in that kind of unproductive guilt can be really draining,
Yeah, it's like you're stuck in this loop of negativity.
It's about taking responsibility for your actions, making amends if you need to, and then just letting go of the guilt that's holding you back.
This makes me think of another behavior that can be tough to deal with, not being able to take no for an answer.
Ah, yeah. that need to control everything.
So it's like sometimes you just got to accept that you're not going to win every battle, you know?
Right. The book tells this story about this consultant who just lost it when his proposal got rejected, like totally blew up.
Oh, wow.
It's a reminder that we can't always get what we want,
Huh.
and that gracefully accepting no is a really important skill.
For sure. It's about managing expectations, I guess.
Exactly. Not taking rejection personally. Speaking of things we can't always control,
Oh, no. What's next?
let's talk about panicking.
Ugh, the dreaded panic attack. We've all been there.
The book tells this story about an NFL executive.
Okay.
He felt like his career was over because of some accusations made against his company.
Oh, wow. High stakes.
Yeah, and it just shows how panic can take over your rational mind. It's like you can't think straight.
Totally. When I panic, it's like my brain just shuts down.
The book gives some good advice for dealing with this. It talks about grounding techniques,
Okay, like what?
deep breathing, focusing on your senses, even engaging in some simple tasks just to kind of bring you back to the present moment.
It's like you need to trick your brain into calming down.
Pretty much. It's all about interrupting that cascade of negative thoughts. And speaking of taking action, let's talk about another behavior that can backfire, quitting too soon.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you got to know when to walk away, but sometimes you give up too easily.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
That
Yeah, between perseverance and knowing when to call it quits. The book has this story about Lewis. He quit his job in a fit of anger, after this big disagreement with his boss.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it really hurt his family financially. He ended up regretting it big time.
It's a good reminder that even when you're frustrated, you need to think things through carefully.
Exactly. Make a conscious choice, not just react emotionally.
Speaking of communication, let's talk about something that can really mess things up at work. Using jargon.
Oh, jargon. It's like a secret code that only some people understand.
Right. And it can alienate people and make it harder for them to, get on board with your ideas.
Totally.
The book uses this great example from the O.J. Simpson trial. The prosecution used all this technical jargon, especially when they were talking about DNA evidence.
Oh, wow.
And it ended up confusing the jury and hurting their case.
It's a good reminder that sometimes simpler is better.
Absolutely. Clarity is key.
Okay, now let's tackle a behavior that I think is rooted in deep insecurity. Worrying about what other people think. Oh yeah, that one's a killer. It's like you're constantly seeking approval, which can be exhausting.
Totally. It's like you're living your life for other people instead of yourself.
The book tells a story about this paralegal, Fanya. She was totally crippled by her boss's feedback,
Oh, I've been there. It's like your self-worth is completely tied to what other people think.
The book encourages us to shift our focus. Instead of seeking validation from others, focus on developing your expertise. Build your confidence in your own judgment.
It's about trusting yourself, right?
Exactly. Now, this leads us to a fear that can really hold us back. The fear of learning new things.
It's funny because in today's world, it's more important than ever to be adaptable and learn new skills.
Right, but that fear can be
Yeah,
paralyzing.
totally. I know I tend to stick with what I know, even if it means missing out on opportunities.
The book explores how this fear is often tied to negative experiences from the past,
Yeah.
like struggling in school or being told you're not good at certain things.
It's like those early messages can really stick with us.
They do. But the good news is that you can challenge those negative messages.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Start by viewing learning as an opportunity.
Instead of a threat.
Yeah. Embrace the discomfort of not knowing everything. And remember, making mistakes is part of the process.
It's all about growth.
You got it. Now, here's another behavior that can sometimes be mistaken for honesty.
Oh, what's that?
Being blunt.
Yeah. There's a fine line between being direct and being rude, I guess.
Exactly. The book uses this example of Lucy. She was always super blunt, and she insisted it was because she was just being honest.
But I'm guessing it wasn't always received that way?
Not really. She often came across as aggressive and disrespectful.
It's a good reminder that we need to be mindful of how our communication style impacts others.
Right. Being direct is fine, but you don't have to be hurtful. Now, speaking of communication, let's talk about a behavior that can make it hard to receive feedback. Being closed off to input.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been there. It's easy to get defensive when you feel like you're being criticized, even if the feedback is well-intentioned.
Book tells a story about Rob, this lawyer, who actually wanted to get feedback.
You did.
Yeah.
He wanted to improve. But he was so defensive that it was almost impossible to give him constructive criticism.
It's like he was blocking himself from growing.
Totally. And the book emphasizes the importance of separating your ego from the feedback, viewing it as an opportunity to learn, not a personal attack.
It's about being open to hearing what other people have to say, even if it's not always easy to hear.
Exactly. And speaking of setting ourselves up for success, let's talk about a behavior that can really undermine our efforts, being unprepared.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely been guilty of that one. Like sometimes you just try to wing it and hope for the best.
The book uses this example of Bill, whose winging it strategy finally caught up with him. He was asked to lead this big project that he knew nothing about.
Yeah, it was a disaster. And it highlights the importance of taking the time to prepare. Gather information, practice your skills so that you can show up confidently and competently.
It's about respecting the process and recognizing that preparation is key.
Now, let's shift gears and talk about a behavior that can be especially tough for managers. Being afraid to fire people.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. It's not easy to let people go, especially when you care about them.
It's tough, but the book makes a strong case for why it's sometimes necessary.
Okay, I'm listening.
It tells this story about Deborah, this manager, who was so afraid of hurting people's feelings that she let this toxic employee stay on her team.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it created this awful work environment for everyone. It's a good reminder that as a leader, you have a responsibility to create a healthy and productive workplace.
And sometimes that means making tough decisions.
Exactly. Now let's talk about a behavior that can lead to a lot of resentment and disappointment.
Okay, what is it?
Expecting your boss to appreciate you.
Oh, yeah. We all want to feel valued and appreciated,
But the book warns us against assuming that our boss will automatically recognize our contribution.
right, it's not always obvious to them.
It tells this story about Charlene, who was totally blindsided by her boss's reaction when she asked for a raise.
Oh, no. What happened?
She just assumed that her boss knew how hard she was working. But the boss hadn't even noticed.
Ouch.
It's a reminder that we need to be proactive in showcasing our value and communicating our expectations.
So it's about understanding our boss's needs and finding ways to exceed their expectations.
Exactly. Appreciation is earned, not given.
Okay, let's wrap things up by talking about two behaviors that can be super stressful: giving and receiving performance reviews.
Ah, yes, the dreaded performance review. It doesn't have to be dreaded, though.
Okay, how do we make it less stressful?
The book encourages us to create a culture of open communication and feedback, where reviews are seen as opportunities for growth, not just these scary evaluations.
It's about taking the fear out of the process.
Right, focus on constructive dialogue and everyone benefits. And finally, let's touch on the difference between healthy venting and just dumping your negativity on other people.
Oh yeah, we've all been on the receiving end of that. It's not fun.
The book uses this example of Megan. She thought she was just venting to a coworker, but she was really just overloading him with all her negativity.
It's about finding healthy ways to process your emotions without bringing other people down.
Exactly. So, wow, this has been a really insightful deep dive into those self-defeating behaviors. Get out of your own way at work really gives us this awesome understanding of what drives these behaviors. And, what's fascinating is that it connects our struggles at work to our experiences as kids. It's like a lot of our adult behaviors are rooted in these patterns from our childhood. But the good news is that we can change. So tell me, which of these behaviors really resonated with you? And what's one small step you can take this week to start getting out of your own way at work? Remember, positive change is totally possible.